4 panelists, 4 community development directors who are going to be part of this panel discussion. So before it could come up to the stage. While we're doing that, we're going to do our first Mentimeter question. So you could pull out your smartphone or your tablet or laptop if you have one. And if you go to smartphone, on the back of your Summit program is the QR code. And if you have a laptop or tablet, you go to minty.com and then enter that code right there, which is 82879075.
Districts. Local Beneficial Bosch. Das ist das
Okay, so the first question was, what would make more housing acceptable in your own neighborhood? And you can select, people in the audience can select as many of those choices as they wanted to. And then we're rating these by percentages. So it looks like installing sidewalks and utilizing backyards or side yards for new homes are the 2 most popular so far. Also, facades that reflect the existing neighborhoods, shorter setbacks from the street. We also have fewer parking requirements. Really interesting. So again, it looks like the top 2 have pretty much stayed so far, utilizing backyards or side yards for new homes, installing sidewalks, and then we've got 3 others that are about the same. Home facades that reflect the existing neighborhood, shorter setbacks from the streets, and fewer park requirements. We're going to, with each of the Mentimeter questions today, we will, when we're done at the end of the day, we will send the results to everybody who signed up, who gave us an email address. You also will all be getting PDFs of the slideshows that we're showing, and also any of the questions that are left on the board back there that we don't answer. So you'll be getting some stuff in the email from us after today. So let's start with our panel here, and Lillquist in her presentation set things up pretty good. We're going to be talking about comprehensive planning. All 4 of your jurisdictions, and I'm going to introduce you now Curtis Lillquist from the City of East Wenatchee, Community Development Director, Kazi Haque, Douglas County Land Services Director, Deanna Walter, Chelan County Community Development Director, and finally Glen DeVries, City of Wenatchee Community Development Director. So all 4 of your jurisdictions, pretty sure are all in the midst of starting to do your comprehensive plan updates. I believe it's June of 2026 when those need to be done. And so my first question today, this is meant to be more of a kind of expression rather than a presentation, but what challenges do each of your jurisdictions foresee in helping meet both our growth needs, which are pretty obvious, as well as these requirements and some of the mandates that the state was handed down? And here, I'm going to hail you. You could pass the mic around as we answer this question.
Are we on now? There we go. Okay, so for Wenatchee, there's challenges for just like every other jurisdiction. Wenatchee is blessed in our urban area that we've got quite a bit of vacant and underdeveloped land, but we're also a little bit cursed in that we've got a lot of infrastructure gaps. We've got areas that don't have sewer. We got areas that don't have fire flow, which is critical for higher density development. And so how do we work through and get infrastructure where we need to have it in order to facilitate middle housing or higher density development? The city of East Wenatchee is a little bit different than other jurisdictions in that we don't own water and sewer. With the city that owns water and sewer, you have one elected body making policy decisions on how you're going to do growth, where's it going to go, if areas need the one elected body determining we need to put more money here for infrastructure or for planning or whatever. With East Wenatchee, we have a separate water district, a separate sewer district, and then the city council. So you've had 3 different elected bodies trying to come together and make policy decisions for growth and development in the urban area. The second challenge that we're working to overcome is community perception about density. Most of the conversations I've had, and part of it comes out the regulations that East Wenatchee has, we look at single family and then we look at apartments. We don't really talk about the stuff that's in between. And there's a lot of different housing types, as Lilith showed, in that in between that can work for infill, that can work for somebody that doesn't have $10 million in financing in order to build an apartment complex. So there's a lot of that we need to start talking, and that's what this forum's about, is to start talking about that middle housing, those fourplexes, those stacked flats, those duplexes. How can we fit those into the neighborhood? And so starting that conversation up again and bringing that stuff back into the common discussion, I think, is the second challenge that we're working on.
All right, thank you, Kurt. I take a moment to thank, on behalf of Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County and staff, Our Valley and our future for the sponsor for giving us an opportunity to be here. Going back to the questions about, obviously the finance has been the major issue in our area, particularly as we look at how the multifamily is going to help, answer some of the questions for housing crisis. What I have seen in the last 1 year, I've been here from Arizona. I moved here a year ago. So I have seen Arizona. I mean, if you guys are fearing about housing, don't worry about it. Because in Arizona, I've seen growth rates of 4,000%. So we are doing 800 to 900 building permits a month. So it was a ride like you've been thrown out in the ocean in a dinghy. You falling out of it, because I've seen the boom and the bust, the whole cycle. And then now we are leveling up, but still they're quite high in how they starts. They're probably third or fourth in the country. But as opposed to us, we had problem with topography here. If you even just look across the river, as opposed to Wenatchee, over at East Wenatchee, we have Chabaches out there. Finance is one of the main issue I've noticed, because right now I have 861 unit multifamily when you go vertical, but it's not moving. They have not taken any permit because there's just not the financial condition is just not right. The market condition is not right for the developers to move forward. So I would say that would be one issue. And then, as Curtis mentioned, there's a societal perception of where our density can go. So that will be a challenge that we have to handle as we move forward. And I also feel like as we are doing a comprehensive plan, and as commerce and GMA requires us to implement those policies, we do that, but there needs to be more coming from the state to show where boots on the ground going to work, because that's not enough financing. There's not enough money to go around. Thank you.
What was the question?
So we've got to see that growth curve in years been happening for decades, and then you also got these state mandates and requirements, and I'm just curious, how do you accommodate all that?
Okay, so I want to stay focused because sometimes I can spend an hour just spit my name out. I would say the biggest challenge from the county perspective is the Growth Management Act. And the fact has not had an overhaul in 30 years, which makes it increasingly more difficult to comply with now the legislative mandates that come in where we're talking about increasing density, but you run up against the GMA issues. So for example, in the county, Chelan County, you probably have the same issues too. We've got critical areas, or resource lands that are no longer viable potentially for farming, but we don't have the opportunity to de-designate because the criteria for de-designation of agricultural lands does not include, I can't afford it anymore. The Growth Management Act has not addressed that. In fact, they have continued to double down at the state level and challenge us. So when we see these, and the cities really have to deal with the middle housing issues, we're trying to accommodate the need for additional housing through other mechanisms. 2 years ago, we took our regulations for ADUs and changed them so that you didn't have to be on site. The owner didn't have to live on site for the ADUs. You could rent both of them out if you wanted. We also, as you all probably have been following, have short-term rental issues. And so balancing the property rights with the needs of the neighborhood, with the needs of the legislature, with the restrictions and confines within the Growth Management Act, we're struggling. We're struggling to be able to accommodate that. We've allowed ADUs since 2011. We just changed our code last year so that the ADUs don't count towards the density in an effort to kind of preemptively, we saw it coming anyway, the legislature. And it's only a matter of time before the counties are going to be required to allow 2 ADUs per parcel. People don't move to the rural areas to live on top of their neighbors or have their neighbors on top of them. There's been no acknowledgement by the legislature to address the shortcomings of growth management as we move forward. I think we got the cart before the horse. And Lilla, I totally appreciate Department of Commerce's role in this. I think you're stuck in the middle. But it's difficult. It's difficult.
So Liz, I had a follow-up question. There's obviously a lot of small farmers in our region who are struggling, have for 3, 4, 5 years. What I've heard, a lot of them are going to quit farming, right? So what I'm hearing from you, if they're out in the county and they're in an agricultural area that's been designated under growth management, are they out of luck in terms of converting their farm into housing?
Potentially. Now, we have provisions in our code that will allow for somebody to seg off the homestead because we recognized very early on, I mean, years and years ago, that you can't get financing. You can't refinance your house if you have a farm on it. So we do have provisions. We have the reduced lot size, but you can only use it once. I mean, we're trying to accommodate the legislative mandates, but we can only go so far without running up against Growth Management Act, which again has not been updated in over 30 years. So I feel like the legislator is telling us to do stuff and then smacking us with the 2x4, also known as Growth Management Act, at the same time. So hope that answers your question.
Well, you go back and pull that. Let me see. Glen DeVries, City of Wenatchee Community Development Department have handouts for you so you can help keep you on track. And to start off, the City of Wenatchee kicked off its comprehensive plan update process in 2024, hiring Burke and Associates to do a housing study. And we had previously, they helped us in 2015, 16 in our last update process, and it was really helpful. So I'd like to hit a few highlights as I go through this. Nearly 3,700 households in Wenatchee can't afford their homes without being cost burden. Over a quarter of the households are cost burden. 4 out of 10 renter households are cost burden. These households have limited incomes remaining to cover other necessities like transportation, food, childcare, and education. And just, I think a lot of you know that cost burden means they're paying more than 30% of their income for housing costs. Looking at rental housing costs, as of 2023, average monthly rent was about $1,500. To afford this rent, a household would need an annual income of nearly $60,000, and about 65% of the renter households in Wenatchee don't have an income to accommodate this. Ownership housing costs, I think we're all aware of the increase in costs on housing. Median sales prices as of August 2023 were $561,000 for a single-family home and $385,000 for a townhome. The income necessary for a family to accommodate this would be about $137,000 for a single-family home for a family, and for an annual income, and about $94,000 for a townhome. This is at the same time while our median household income is about $66,000, putting it out of reach of a majority of households in the city of Wenatchee. So take that and then transition over to our population allocations. And you can take a look there and see, as Lilith mentioned, we're directed through the legislature to Commerce. They gave us a formula we have to use, and we coordinate with the county and the other cities in doing that. So we had these allocations, and you can see that for the city of Wenatchee, we need 6,275 units by 2046. For all cities and the county, I just want to note something though. That's not really the accurate number, because there's something called pipeline units. Those are units that have already been approved. State makes us start at 2020, which is not where we're at. We're at 2025. So you could take all the units that have been constructed or are in process since that census date and subtract them. So actually for the city of Wenatchee, we're in the 4,000 range as far as the number of units. Doesn't mean that it's not challenging, but that's the real number we're playing with here. So everybody's units are going to be in the same boat. It's not the full number that's been mentioned. One of the things, though, if you look at it here, 0 to 50% as far as the household incomes, we need 2,357 units in that category. That is massive. 1,048 units in the 50 to 80% category. So even though while we've had growth since 2020, we haven't had a lot of growth in those categories. Our housing production has been about 126 units a year, but our need is about 241 units. That number will go down a little bit, but we're doing only about half of what we need. And then if you look at the numbers of the deficiencies by income type, not in any of the categories by income, we're not meeting our needs as far as the number of units. But what's really concerning is the 0 to 50% category. And the time frame that was analyzed here, we only had 20 units created in that category, in that range. If I look when I started City of Wenatchee in 2013, we've only had 85 units constructed in the 0 to 50% category. But we're supposed to provide by 2046, 2,357 units. That's a challenge. So we're in the middle of our land capacity analysis. Just briefly look at the capacity by zone, the categories allowed by housing types and density level, categories by income levels and housing types served. You summarize that capacity by zone category, and you see how you do whether you have capacity. That's an analysis that you can make tweaks to your zoning. It's possible to do that. That's not really my biggest concern out of this process. My biggest concern that keeps me awake at night is this. We have to document programs and actions to achieve our housing goals. So this is very different than planning in the past. We have to go in and identify the barriers to actually achieve those units. So those 2,400 units for 0 to 50, we are obligated to show how we build them. What are the barriers and what are the action items? This slide I have here for you is from the housing element requirements guidebook. It is on the Commerce website. It's actually, if you want to see the flavor of what we're facing, I don't know if you want to call it an interesting read, but it's the subject matter that we're going through. I'm going to look at the strategies and the barriers in the next question, which correlates.
Yeah, I'm going to go, actually, Glenn, skip over that question because we're running a little bit behind here. But this one is for you and Curtis, and that is, and we're talking about all these requirements from the state. We continue to have growth here in this region. We also face up against what I would call geographical constraints, particularly in the greater Wenatchee area with the foothills, the mountains, the river. When you guys look ahead for 20 years, it seems that we're already pretty dense here, particularly on the Wenatchee side.
How transformative do you see things being over the next 20 years in terms of housing?
Want me to go first, buddy, or might as well? All right. So this really isn't new for the city of Wenatchee. We looked at this in 2015 through 17 in our goals, and then we adopted it in 19. We just tweaked it. We adopted all our missing housing components that we're required to do as far as amendments. Really, what came out of our early process is the neighborhoods, the development community wanted predictability. But then in the neighborhoods, the developers wanted predictability of process and standards. We got rid of planned residential development processes. And what we really came up with was a 4-step process that a neighbor could ask or developer could ask. 1, is the use permitted? 2, can I fit it on the site? Height, setbacks, lot coverage. Blending into the neighborhood, good site planning, open space orientation to street access, and then respecting the neighborhood character, looking at design standards. And really, there's some pictures here. We're really going back to the past as far as things that we've already allowed historically that our codes went away from allowing, and now we're allowing again. So it is feasible to blend these. It's been done in the past. We have residential design guidelines that look at the character of our neighborhoods throughout the city and incorporate those as a variety of options. And then there are tools. And we track those and discussing them with developers as we go, the problem areas that we see, and we make modifications. So that blended density concept is doable, and it's been done in the past, and there's a lot of rich examples in the city.
What about, and maybe this is 20 years, beyond 20 years, but in the city of Wenatchee, are we likely to see also taller residential buildings?
Certainly, I think so. And a lot of these residential heights have been there for a long time, but haven't been taken advantage of. And as we're a constrained city surrounded by the river and hills, and so certainly we're starting to see folks take advantage of the heights that have been historically allowed and starting to maximize some of the allowed densities for the housing types.
Yeah, I was struck by the Cascadian, which I think was built in the 1820s. I think is still maybe technically Wenatchee's tallest building. And, nothing since then that's come close to that. So, Glenn, or Curtis?
Let's see. So, building on what Glenn just talked about, we will. I think we will be seeing more design review, and I don't want to immediately jump to an issue where the city mandates a design review for all residential. I think we start with education and going back to being respectful to our neighbors. Let's look at housing as we try to fit it into a neighborhood and design it such that it is respectful to the people that already live in the neighborhood. I go to a conversation I've had before about somebody where multifamily, let's say just a 2-story fourplex going into a neighborhood, and the neighbor's concerned that those second stories are going to overlook into their yard, looking at their pool or at their back deck. So how do we talk to people and get people that are looking at doing projects? How do we get them to take into consideration the neighbors around the project that they're working on, and fit it in so that we have less resistance in neighborhoods. I think we're going to also see a change in ownership patterns. And what I mean by that is Lilith was talking about the unit lot subdivision process where people, through those processes, you can divide the land underneath the higher density units and sell that off so that you have more ownership and less rental. Two reasons I think that's a great thing. One, having ownership of the house you're living in is better, but also there's not a lot of people that are willing to build and then be landlords for the next 30 years. There's more people that are willing to build and then sell and then obtain that capital and move on and do another project. So having more opportunities for ownership through either the unit lot subdivision or fixing the problems with the condominiumization and the liability issues around condos. I want to jump back since we're skipping a question. I want to add a couple things into there. I would like to see that a better discussion between, and this isn't in the landscape, this is a better discussion between the energy conservation advocates and the housing affordability advocates. And they're not talking right now. And what we're getting is the energy conservation advocates are winning at the State Building Code Council. And every single reiteration of the building code is adding $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 to a unit because of energy conservation requirements. There needs to be a discussion between and we need to talk. We need to be talking to our elected officials and having them put pressure on the building code council in order to have a more balanced approach.
Glenn, do you want to add anything? Like we passed over that question. Barriers.
Sure. We did Burke helped us look at the barriers since we have that requirement now. And so we have a whole series of recommendations for Burke. Commerce has about a 4-page list. So I attached those in attachments. So that's something that we as a community are going to need to take a look at. There are options, but it is something through the public process, the planning commission, and then our city council will need to look at adopting. Getting through identifying the barriers and then having the action items to address that component. But I still think it's, even with those, it's going to be tough.
Next question is going to be for Deanna and Kazi. Our communities here in this region, we have a lot of commonalities, but there are also some differences, particularly when we start to talk about unincorporated areas versus the incorporated areas. Both of your counties right now, your departments are involved in updating your comprehensive plans. I went back and I looked at some population figures. These are projections, I think, from Office of Financial Management. During the pandemic years, this is 2020 through 2023, the rate of population growth in Chelan and Douglas was higher in the unincorporated areas than it was in the incorporated areas. And then the population allocations for the next 20 years are projecting 20% growth in unincorporated areas of Douglas County and about 12% growth in unincorporated areas of Chelan County. Tell us a little bit about what's driving that growth and how that impacts your own comprehensive planning work.
Okay, so I want to start off by just announcing to Department of Commerce, we are not changing our allocations. Just so you know. I've been asked before. It was negotiated between the cities and the county, and we're all happy with it. And the reality of it is that the housing is going to be determined by the market, not by a housing allocation that we use a formula with. So that being said, Chelan County has about 86% of the property in Chelan County is tax exempt. About 80% of it is actually publicly owned. And you heard Glenn just talking about the constraints with the city, also topographic issues. Well, as the city grows, the county shrinks when it comes to developable area. So as we're looking at our comprehensive plan and our land capacity analysis, we need to take that into consideration. I don't even know if I'm answering this question. I'm just going to go. Again, the same issues. And Kazi's going to have the same issues too. In our land capacity analysis, we have to take into consideration our resource lands. And so we are incredibly constrained. And I don't know how we're going to, I mean, we're just in the beginning stages of doing our land capacity analysis. I don't know how we're going to get all of those people out in the rural area, 12%. And I think that's typically because we have a lot less landed area available. But I did, when we did our allocation, I did reserve some of that lower income, and that's what Department of Commerce is asking us to reconsider, which I'm not going to. I can't state that enough. We are going to do an urban growth area out in Malaga. And so we need to have some of that allocation so that we can appropriately zone those areas and meet our goals for the increase in housing. So it is strategic on our part. It may look like it's hodgepodge, but we are thinking ahead. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I was struck by, at least in the pandemic years, how the unincorporated areas in our region had grown faster than the incorporated areas. And I think I probably know why, because we had a lot of people move here for quality of life reasons, right? Yeah.
Well, and people didn't necessarily move here, which is why we now have our short-term rental regulations in place. We have a very large percentage of our housing stock are second homes. And so we'd love to see those rented on a full-time basis for workforce housing, but we can't force that. All we can do is say you can't use it for less than 30 days. But some of them up around the Lake Chelan area are vacant 9% of the time because they're second homes. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I guess I agree with Dina. And one of the things I noticed, based on the question you asked about the, the growth that we have noticed in our unincorporated areas, probably started back when the COVID, 2019 started. And as you know, people in Seattle was probably one of the first epicenter where people were able to find out. And then we did not have a national unified direction, what we're doing with virus and all that. So we stayed there to take care of it. I was in Arizona. We had a different set of rules. At Washington, a different set. So I think the people at that time, especially those who had enough disposable money, as well as maybe with boards of retirement, they felt good moving out to rural. Washington was one of the better choice to stay from virus. So I did calculate some. There was quite a bit of influx in migration, if you will. So that's what happened. And then, as Gina mentioned, a lot of second homes. And I think that trend continues. So even today, as we are building single-family residential, we had like 208 permits even like last year. Out of that, only 198 was actually built, but they were all luxury homes. They were not affordable for anybody, 80% MI or anything like that. So it's above 115. So you see, I think that gap is still there. And we really do need to have a talk with about GMA and commerce that Dina mentioned. It's a very endemic around our area. We are not going to be able to solve all the housing needs just with policy alone. We have to discuss some of the GNA barriers because we have so many residents out here that paying out of their pocket for a land, they cannot do anything about it because there's very old regulation that still persists.
And then it's in both counties, when it comes to accommodating growth, you're talking about additional infrastructure.
Yes, of course, the infrastructure is also a big challenge, as you know, because of our topography, as we mentioned. And as well, if you notice, our road patterns and it's been very different. I mean, whoever was involved in those days, I'm not sure I wasn't here, but it's challenging. And then everybody, there's a notion out here that that everything has to be picked up by the cities and towns and counties to pay for those infrastructure. But we have a very decentralized infrastructure like utilities. What's going on with the sewer district, what's going on water, PUDs and all that, it's so separate. So developer has to deal with each entity. After they go through C, they have to talk to sewer district, and each one of them has different set of rules. So that is also could be incremental barrier, in my opinion. And also, we need to have much more cohesive plan. We don't know where the water lines are going. We don't know where the sewer lines, where we can direct our growth at this time. But hopefully, through our comprehensive plan, we can get all the parties together, talk about those things.
Okay, that's great. I know all 4 jurisdictions are going to be accepting public comment at some point. I think the city of Wenatchee, Douglas County, the back of the table there, I know you guys have handouts regarding surveys you're already conducting. Chelan County, I assume, will be having some, public meetings. Curtis, I would say the same for the city of East Wenatchee. Yes. You do too, okay. Deanna?
We're a little behind. We're a little behind. Yeah, there will be lots of opportunity for public comment, but we're still doing our capacity analysis. We're little late coming to the table getting a contract. One of the struggles, and nobody has really talked about this, when the state requires us to do our periodic updates, so 24, 25, and 26 are the years. That's for every jurisdiction across the state. How many consultants do you think are out there that'll do the work? Right? So I did an all and invited the cities to come in so we could catch a bigger fish. And we had one response. The city of Chelan and Chelan County are doing it jointly, but one response. So there's lots of competition out there.
That's stuff. Rachel, do we have any questions? Yep, you're right. Okay, so what is the status on laws for unit lot subdivisions in Wenatchee, Kashmir, Dryden, and Leavenworth?
Wait, okay. We adopted them at 2019.
For East Wenatchee, we don't have them yet, but that is a project I currently have on my desk. My expectation is the city will adopt a unit lot subdivision code by late summer.
Was that the question? For me. Some codes don't currently allow for more than one kitchen in a house. Will that change? Especially to allow for multi-generational family living or co-living?
That's definitely something that can be that can be part of the conversation. I think right now the initial focus that we've had is like attached ADUs or internal ADUs, where you take a space within your house, a walkout basement, turn it into a whole separate dwelling unit, or attach and have a whole separate. That's been the focus right now, is to look at a whole separate dwelling unit. But we can definitely look at, especially with changes to the accessory dwelling unit requirements, that just adding extra kitchens or space, we'd have to flush out how that would work with the building code or a few things like that, but it's definitely on the table.
We actually have had this come up quite a bit. It's not uncommon for somebody to have a second kitchen or bar or whatever downstairs. People used to do canning kitchens all the time. The difference is that at lock-off area that has sleeping and their own restroom. Now it's an ADU, and we permit those, but let's do it legally and lawfully so that they're safe for the occupants.
I follow along with what Curtis said. We significantly expanded what we could do with ADUs and attached ADUs within a dwelling. So I think that would be the tool to use to get there.
All right, thank you. We have a new Mentimeter.
I'll fill the time here while she's working. Some of the things that we would like to know in East Wenatchee as part of our comprehensive planning process is so density is coming. We need to do it one way or the other. We need to know from people what can we do as the jurisdiction, whether it's around the structure or around site planning. What can we do to make the density that's coming in more palatable to a neighborhood? We need to understand that better so that we can help work to get that type of housing that fits into a neighborhood and becomes what I call a good neighbor. The second thing that we're interested in is we have developers that do their projects, builders that do their projects, and that's what they do. But looking at property owners, looking at citizens or people that may want to do these, may be interested in doing these low, a fourplex, a duplex, a stacked flat. They may be interested in doing it, but they're like, I'm not sure. What can we do to get you from maybe to yes? So similar to what Glenn and I were able to work with our leadership within both cities, we did the pre-approved ADU program where we have 13 sets of plans. They're already pre-approved by the building officials, so that the permit time is cut down. The permit costs are a little bit less because we've already pre-done that. We tried to knock off on ADUs. We've tried to knock off a few of those things to get people from maybe to yes. So what else can we do, especially in these infill projects, to get people from maybe to yes?
Thank you, Curtis. And now you see the multimeters up. So we have 2 questions here at this time. So this one, and then if you need to put the code back in. It's menti.com, and the code's up there, 82E79075. Give it another 30 seconds or a minute, and then we'll go into the next question.
While we're waiting, so I have lots of people ask about pre-approved plans in the county too. They're fantastic for the cities. They work well. The county, we would really struggle with that because we've got geohazards that may require specific foundations, beefed up engineering. We also had different snow loads across the county. So I would love to be able to implement something like that, but we would have 30 different sets of plans, and it's just unmanageable at this point.
Thank you. And I'd like to give another round of applause for our panelists. And look, big hands up. So, yeah, we have one more question we're going to put up right now. But again, another applause for them. Thank you so much for all the great work that they're doing. You're blessed to be tired of Ruby's Skype the Beaver today.